Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org. Consequence and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here, for checking out the episode. Please do hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with all the interviews that we put out every single week. 3 interviews every single week. It's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I'm so excited today. Niki is here with a brand new album. Hello.
Hey, hey, thanks so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to meet you. And it has been a pleasure to listen to this brand new album. Buzz,
Oh,
it's
you.
there's something like it feels like you're a completely different artist this time around. Like they're the obvious breadcrumbs to the records that you had done in the past, but this feels
Sure.
like something different. I mean, does it feel that different for you having been the one who did it?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that I see a general through line and like an evolution. But yeah, I could totally see why this would feel really different. I mean, it is in a lot of ways, but yeah, I call this record like my last record's older, wiser sister.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I want to get into a little bit of the reasons why that might be too. But the impressive thing is looking back and realizing that you just finished the tour of that last record less than a year ago. What, maybe 10
Yeah.
months ago or so?
Yeah, literally like this. I went on tour I think last August. I started the victory lap of that tour. Yeah.
I
So it
mean,
hasn't even been a year.
so because that takes a lot of time to tour, to do the whole thing. That takes so much time.
For
Were you
sure.
riding on the road? Did you wait till you came off? Like, how do you flip it this quick from the end of that tour to the beginning of this cycle?
Yeah, well, my I started touring my last record in 2022 and then obviously it concluded last year, but I started writing this album sort of in 2022 on that first tour in North America, and that it just kind of naturally evolved into an album. But at the time, like the first song I wrote for this record is track 10, Strong Girl. I mean, I didn't even know that it was going to turn into Buzz.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's just kind of how it happened.
Yeah. Well, as we read, getting into these songs, I mean, you can't look past this thing, especially in the press release where it says you had an identity crisis. And that's a
Yeah,
big, heavy line to
sure,
talk about.
totally.
Yeah, and I can imagine it was much heavier to go through than me to read it, obviously. But so, if you don't mind, like what did that mean for you?
Yeah, I say this often, but I really feel like nowadays I feel awake for the first time. And I don't know, I think, I moved to the States from Indonesia. I was born and raised there in I moved here in 2017, and that was like the first big uproot of my life, kind of restarting from scratch. And then, after that, I sort of just started doing this, like music and being an artist and touring and writing and all that stuff. And so I just feel like my life had been a constant series of this feeling of being uprooted. And then the pandemic happened, and then I was forced to sit down in my apartment for, and that's not exclusive to me. Everybody went through that. Um, and then I kind of just, that was the beginnings of sort of existentialism for me, and just sort of like, what am I doing? What brings me joy? What, all that stuff. And I feel like this album was truly, even though it's my third one, technically, it really does feel like my first ever real attempt at kind of like doing it completely the way I want, if
Mm.
that makes sense. Just stepping into myself and into my art with conviction. uh yeah, that's what this album has been. So it's helped me kind of like, I don't know, forge some kind of identity, I guess.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Well, who was that artist that you found? When you got there.
yeah, I would say I think it's not really an artist so much as, I mean, the artist is part of it, but I feel like it's more the person. And I feel like the person that I've discovered, I guess, is just someone that really values balance in life. And I think it's just sort of a really difficult, sweet spot to kind of find and stumble upon in this very fast-paced society and world and, thing that we live in. And but when you do strike that sweet spot of balance, it just almost feels like, life is worth living and everything feels manageable and worthwhile. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think this album was sort of just an album that kind of helped me arrive at a place of acceptance. I feel like often we try to fight reality and we're just like, no, this can't be what it is. Like, I feel so much pain and it's so tough. But I feel like writing the entirety of Buzz has helped me arrive at this, like, place of, you know, life can be many things all at once, all the time.
Sure.
It's a blend of like, it sucks and it's great, and it feels irresolute and uncertain all the time. And that's just life. And that's kind of what I try to touch on.
You can hear that too, because there are points in this album where you're like, this is the most heartbreaking album I've ever heard. But it's not, it does, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. It doesn't feel encompassingly as a heartbreak album, because you have
Totally.
these other moments where you, or I should say the narrator, the character, whoever, is falling in
Yeah.
love, or
Right.
just feeling themselves, or whatever it is,
Right.
But then when you start it on that title track there, the show's about to start, the door is about to open.
Yep.
I'm assuming that's purposefully put as your first track for a reason. But
Totally.
when did you know that to write it like that, I guess is what I'm saying, is it feels like you're setting up the album to be a story.
Right.
Like,
Right.
is it a story? Is it a linear story?
That's, you know, I wouldn't say so. I don't think it's linear. It can be linear if you want. I'm definitely one of those. I'm an artist that says, hey, like interpret it however it suits you. Because at the end of the day, I sort of see my work and my songs as just kind of like a vessel for how you want to inject your own experience um, into it. And yeah, for me personally, I would say it's not linear.
Mhm.
It's kind of just piecemeal of the last 2 years of my life and my own story of, and it's intentionally not linear to symbolize the fact that life is very messy. And yeah, it's just like this, and then it's this, and then it's that, and it's unpredictable. And yeah, that's kind of how I track listed it. It's sort of just, yeah, kind of piecemeal,
Yeah.
basically.
So were you writing the songs after you sort of figured out yourself and the identity parts, or did the songs come after that?
Um, I mean, I feel like it's an ever, it's a continuous thing. I don't know if I've really arrived at a destination and or like at, all of a sudden I know who I am. I think I have a better idea of who I am, or what I like and what I enjoy and what, brings me fulfillment.
Mhm.
But I think it's a journey, and I'm sure the answer will change in like a year and in 5 and in 10. So
That's when, like, the next album you say, no, this is my most personal album. And then
yeah,
the one after that
exactly.
you say, no, this is my most personal album.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly. It's
I mean, that
always,
is,
I
it's
mean, it
interesting
is.
as a songwriter too, because in this moment, of course, this is you, and as we've seen, the version of you from 2 albums ago, your first album,
Yeah.
like, how much do you relate to her at this point? It's one of those
Totally.
things.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I have a lot of compassion and empathy and yeah, for her. But obviously, like in terms of how much I relate to her, I mean, not a lot, because I was so young. I was 17 or 18, 19, and now I'm 25, and so much life has been lived since. And um, but yeah, I mean, I still hold those albums, I still view them sweetly and fondly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm constantly. I saw an interview with Joni Mitchell where she was like, I don't ever listen to my stuff because I'm just constantly gonna want to tinker and edit and say, oh, why did I do it that way? And I just had never related to anything more. Um, so yeah, I try to look back with fondness, and that's that.
I think most artists agree with you
You're right.
that I've gotten on that. I find it interesting and even fun when I hear an artist say, I created the music I wanted to listen to and I love listening to my music. For
Right,
some
right.
reason that's so rare. And I don't mean
Totally.
to say it's like right or wrong or whatever, that's their own lane, but it's like it's really interesting when they're like, yeah, I play my album all the time.
For sure. And you know what? Like, I would say Buzz is the first album where I have truly 110% felt that.
Mhm.
Um, and that was intentional, like I said to myself at the beginning of this, like, I, I want to make an album where one, I'd be happy to tour for years and years. Like it has to just be a collection of songs I'll be happy to play over and over and over again and never get tired of it. And it would have to be an album that I would just be so happy to blast in the car all the time to myself and just listen to my own album and like it and be proud of it. And yeah, that was the sole kind of like idea that motivated this.
Joni, what's your go-to era for Joni?
Ooh, that's hard. I mean, maybe it's basic, but I do love the Blue album. Like it's just, I mean, A Case of You's on there, so you can't write a better song than that. I love Clouds as well, but I also honestly have, I mean, production-wise, Hijira is
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah.
Just like, ugh. And Corn Spark obviously is like also. Anyway, sorry, I'm just like saying
No,
all
that's
the
it. I can go
but
there. I like Coyote was what drew me that like I had Blue and I loved
oh
it,
my
and then
gosh.
Coyote was the one that made me like huge. And
Right.
lately I because her 80s work sort of got looked over because of the production,
Totally.
but listening to songs like Number One and Coming from the Cold and just realizing that her like she didn't falter on her songwriting ever. Like there was no bad era for her songwriting, even if the production sounds dated. It's
For sure.
crazy.
She's just art like
Yeah.
embodied. She's my North Star, I think, for being unapologetic with what you have to say and in your art and just kind of doing it your way
Mhm.
completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of those songs, by the way, and not to say they are not Joni like, but just how like Colossal Loss and Do You Like Her in the Morning
Yeah.
specifically, like these are world destroying songs, lyrically speaking. But like Morning is so heartbreaking to overuse that word. What was it like recording that song? Do you have to have separation from the moment?
It's a good question. Did You Like Her in the Morning specifically is interesting because it was a there were a few years actually in between. So I first wrote it in 2019 and then I shelved it and revisited it for this album. I was like, oh my God, there's that one song that I wrote that I loved. And it never really felt like it belonged anywhere until now. So at that, when I first wrote it in 2019, I remember just like, oh, you know what had happened? I had read The Artist's Way by Julia
Yeah.
Cameron. And I had it was during a period of really severe, intense writer's block. And I did the thing where I would do the morning pages, where it's like 3 pages, stream of consciousness every morning. It's like a brain dump. And for the first like month, I was like, ah, it's not going anywhere. And then I literally like one day I just woke up and I wrote Did You Like Her in the Morning in like 20 minutes. And I was like, whoa, maybe this thing really does work. But yeah, in the moment I felt really connected to it. At some points I had to stop because I was like, I felt like I was re-triggering myself in some ways.
Mm.
Um, but now, like again, I'm 25 and I look back, I was 20 when I wrote that. Um, it's just fondness. And I actually, yeah, I just think sometimes I have these moments of, I can't believe I wrote that. I was a much better writer then than I am now. And yeah, I have those moments all the time where I just have a lot of respect for my past self and what she was going through. And yeah.
I think
So,
that about that a lot. You hear that thing like, "Oh, when I was young, I was so much more dumb or stupid or whatever." When I look back on my own writing or interviews or whatever, I'm like, "Yeah, I think I was better."
totally, totally. I think that all the time, where I'm like,
Yeah.
have I regressed? Who's to say?
I can tell you haven't because again, this record is easily your best record as far as I'm concerned. Those two songs, by the way, Colossal Loss with Do You Like Her in the Morning?
Yeah.
Um, my takeaway, other than just them being so lyrically powerful, is just to don't, pardon me, don't fuck with Niki. Because they do feel like sister songs or a part of his same story, I guess is what it feels like. Because they're on
Sure.
the album together.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's some of my more favorite parts. Do lyrics come easy for you outside of your writer's block moment?
I I think it's a toss up, really. There are some songs that are, take a lot longer to kind of appear and form, and then there's some songs that I just spew out in like 20 minutes. Like Did You Like Her in the Morning? Um, but yeah, I do have a lyric bank where on my phone, it's my in my notes app, and it's just kind of like anytime I think of a line or something I really want to say in a song, I write it down. And I think Colossal Loss was actually one of those things just because I loved how I said how it's like there's loss twice in that title,
Mhm.
and it just kind of flowed off, or yeah, rolled off the tongue really nicely. And I'm like, that's kind of a fun lyric or like a fun title maybe. So yeah, I kind of stashed it, and then eventually, when I had material, um, it became a song. So
It reminded me of I've got REM over my shoulder, and Michael Stipe was sort of famous for that. And what he would do, like he would do what you're talking about. He had his book of lyrics, just phrases
right,
that sounded good, and he would make them into a song, but he wouldn't like clean them up to make them work together. And then the audience would be like, like just pouring over it like this was and again, I say this like REM is my favorite band of all time. But
right,
but to try to make meaning out of something that he sort of never intended for
right,
there to be real meaning for. It's such an interesting relationship with the
for
songwriter and
sure.
the audience.
For sure, totally. Yeah. I stumble upon moments like that. I have stumbled upon moments like that throughout my career for sure, where I just like, I had the seeds for an idea and then kind of wrote the song to the title or whatever later. And then just kind of at the end of it being like, whoa, it's not at all what I expected when I first, like had this idea, and then I maybe like it better now. So yeah, that happens often.
I'm just looking at the track list here. Of course, too much of a good thing. God, that's so good. That
Hey,
all slinky and we got
I
Ethan Gruska helping you out,
Ethan
like
produced it, yeah.
producing, right? Yeah,
Yep, he did. Yes.
yeah.
I love that song. It's my most like unapologetic kind of when we wrote it, I was like, I want to have a song that feels like The Chain by Fleetwood Mac, and but also with that kind of bravado of like uh Come Together by the
Yeah,
Beatles, right?
yeah.
And I just want a track where you just have an iced latte in your hand, it's summer, and you're in like some urban landscape and you're just walking down the street with your iced latte and your headphones, not a care in the world. And yeah, and then he kind of came up with that bass line for Too Much of a Good Thing, and then rest is history.
It's one of
Yeah.
my favorites, right? I bet I've listened to it a dozen times this week, and I'm not even kidding about that.
That means a
So,
lot.
yeah, that's a great one. And then, we get to the end of the record, and I'm wondering if I wrote these words down wrong, but the record ends with "No one will save you." Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yes.
that's a good
Totally.
line to end on.
Thanks.
No, see, here we
Very,
are. We're talking about that
very
non-linear
optimistic.
thing. Yeah, we're talking about the non-linear thing, but this is still in the same way that Buzz and the show's about to start. Is
Right.
there a reason why this is at the end?
Yeah, nothing can track 13. I, for a long time, kind of kept seesawing between it should be the opener or it should be the closer. But either way, it felt like the song that had a lot of impact. and to me at least, on sort of like a messaging perspective. But yeah, it ended up feeling better as the closer because of how irresolute it is. There's no answer in that song, and I feel like I was very conscious of that throughout writing this, where it's just like there are no answers sometimes, and you just have to make them up as you go. And Nothing Can is about um, that accepting that, life, even though life sucks and is full of suffering and pain a lot of the time, um, there are still these little moments in between of just pure joy and gratitude and fulfillment, um, that make it all worthwhile, kind of thing. So, the chorus, both choruses starts off with a pretty tense chord progression. Um, it's like I don't want to get into the weeds of, I don't know if you, but it's just like, it's like the two major into the three major into the four. And then that, to me, that has always felt like a very tense chord progression.
Mm.
And then those lines are like, you're all alone again. You look around your bedroom, you're all alone, whatever. But then it kind of goes to a much happier chord progression where you say, but even though you're alone, you're still gonna smile at a stranger. You're still gonna make weekend plans. You're still gonna get breakfast with the band on tour. And it's like life can still be great in those little moments. It's like it's always yes and.
Mhm.
Um, so that, yeah, that was a really meaningful song for me. I felt like writing that song felt like therapy in and of itself. So yeah.
I love the way it all came together. I love the way it's structured. And it is because it still feels like a journey to me.
Thank you.
I loved going on it with you. Seriously, it's one of my favorite albums of the year, and I mean that too. So
Wow, that's very
congratulations on
nice.
this.
I
Yeah,
really appreciate that. That means a lot. Thanks,
yeah.
Kyle.
Nikki, it was great talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. It was awesome.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. All 3 of them, the address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.